The lunch bell at Lincoln High always hit like a starting gun. Backpacks dropped, chairs scraped, and the hallway emptied in under a minute. Inside the cafeteria, the air thickened fast, steam from the hot line mixing with chatter, laughter, and the occasional shout over nothing important. For most kids, lunch was the one break in the day where they could just be. No tests, no teachers hovering, no pressure, just food, friends, and a little breathing room. But not everyone got that kind of peace. Near the back corner, tucked beside, a window that hadn't been cleaned since last winter, a boy sat alone. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't sulking. He just liked the quiet. His tray held the usual: a slightly soggy slice of pizza, a carton of chocolate milk, and an apple he'd probably take home for later. He ate slowly, eyes on the courtyard outside, where a few kids tossed a football around like they had all the time in the world. He'd learned early on that staying out of the spotlight made things easier. Not because he was shy, though people often assumed that, but because drawing attention rarely led anywhere good. At this school, being noticed usually meant becoming a target. And he'd had enough of that to last a lifetime. He didn't see them coming at first. They moved like a pack, laughing too loud, shoulders squared, voices rising just enough to cut through the noise. 3 of them. Juniors, maybe seniors. The kind of students teachers called charismatic but meant untouchable. They'd never failed a class, not because they were brilliant, but because no one wanted the hassle of failing them. Coaches protected them. Some teachers ignored them. Everyone else just tried not to get in their way. They stopped at his table like it was their right. "Yo," the tallest one said, grinning like it was a joke. "You lost or something?" The boy didn't look up. He took another bite of pizza. "I'm good," he said quietly. The second one leaned in, hands on the table. "Nah, man. This section? It's kinda reserved." "For who?" the boy asked, still calm. "For people who belong," the third one chimed in, voice dripping with fake sweetness. A few nearby students glanced over, then quickly looked away. No one moved. No one spoke. That silence, the kind that feels heavier than shouting, was its own kind of answer. The tall one snatched the boy's tray without warning and dumped it on the floor. Pizza slapped against linoleum. Milk carton burst open, spilling brown liquid across scuffed tiles. The apple rolled under a nearby bench. "There," the tall one said, stepping back with a smirk. "Now you got nothing to stay for. So go on. Leave." For a long moment, the boy just sat there. Not angry. Not crying. Just still. Like he was deciding something important. Then he stood. Slowly. Deliberately. He didn't say a word. Didn't glare. Didn't curse. He just pushed his chair, wiped his hands on his jeans, and walked out of the cafeteria like he'd planned to leave all along. Behind him, the 3 laughed. Loud, relieved, triumphant. "Man, did you see his face?" one said. Like he didn't even know what hit him. But as the boy stepped into the hallway, the laughter faded fast. Because someone had been watching. A freshman sitting 2 tables over had pulled out their phone the second the tray hit the floor. They didn't post it right away. Just saved the clip, heart pounding, unsure what to do with it. Back inside, the mood shifted. The usual lunchtime buzz felt off. Conversations dropped to whispers. Eyes darted toward the empty corner table, then to the 3 boys who were now trying too hard to act like nothing happened. One of them kicked at the spilled milk with his shoe, suddenly uncomfortable. Outside, the boy didn't go to the office. Didn't head to the nurse. He walked to the far end of the school past the art wing and sat on a bench under a dying oak tree. He pulled out a notebook from his backpack and started writing. Not about what happened, but about something else entirely. A story he'd been working on. A character who faced down a storm and didn't flinch. He wasn't thinking about revenge. He wasn't plotting anything dramatic. He just needed space to remember who he was outside of that moment. Outside of their words. Meanwhile, inside the cafeteria, the video began to spread. Not widely, not yet, but enough. A text here, a DM there. "Did you see what happened at lunch?" Yeah, it's messed up. Why didn't anyone stop them? The questions piled up faster than answers. The three boys started noticing the stares, the way people moved away when they walked by, the sudden quiet when they entered a room. It wasn't outrage, not yet, but something quieter, sharper, disappointment, disgust, the kind that doesn't shout but settles in deep. One of them tried to laugh it off in the hallway after lunch. Whatever, man, dude was sitting in our spot, no big deal. But his voice wavered, and no one laughed with him. By the end of the day, the clip had been sent to at least a dozen students. No caption, no commentary, just 47 seconds of raw, uncomfortable truth. And in those 47 seconds, something changed, not just for the boy who walked out, but for everyone who watched and felt that knot in their stomach. Because what happened wasn't just about one lunch tray. It was about who gets to take up space, who gets to feel safe, who gets ignored, and who finally decides they won't be. The boy under the oak tree didn't know any of this yet. He was still writing, still lost in his story. But back inside, the ground had already started to shift beneath their feet. And the three who thought they'd won at lunch? They'd find out soon enough that pushing someone out doesn't always make them disappear. Sometimes, it just makes everyone else finally look. The next morning, the halls of Lincoln High felt different. Not in a dramatic way, no shouting, no protests, no sudden chaos, but in the quiet things. The way students lingered near lockers longer than usual, eyes flicking toward the cafeteria doors. The way conversations dipped when certain people walked by. The way lunch tables rearranged themselves without anyone saying a word. It started with a video. Just a short clip, shaky and silent except for the muffled sounds of the cafeteria. No music, no captions, no dramatic zoom-ins. Just a boy sitting alone, three others crowding him, a tray hitting the floor, and then him walking out like he'd had enough, and maybe he had. The person who filmed it didn't post it to a public feed. They sent it to a few friends first. Then those friends sent it to more. By second period, half the school had seen it. Nobody called it viral. That word felt too flashy for something so raw. But it spread like a rumor with proof, and that made it harder to ignore. At first, most kids didn't know what to do with it. Some felt angry. Others felt guilty for not stepping in. A few even tried to downplay it. It was just a joke, or he didn't seem that upset. But the more they watched it, the less those excuses held up. Because the truth was in the silence, the way no one moved, the way the boy didn't yell or cry, the way he just left like he'd learned long ago that fighting back only made things worse. By lunchtime, the cafeteria looked like a map of shifting loyalties. The usual crowd around the three boys had thinned. Two of their closest friends sat at a different table, pretending to be deeply interested in their math homework. A group of sophomores who used to laugh at their jokes now ate in the library. Even the lunch staff seemed to move slower near that corner, as if giving the space a wide berth. The boy didn't show up for lunch at all. Instead, he sat on the same bench under the oak tree, notebook open, pencil moving steadily across the page. He hadn't seen the video. No one had told him about it, not yet. He just assumed the day would play out like any other. Classes, quiet moments, homework. He didn't expect to become the center of anything, but inside the school, his absence spoke louder than his presence ever had. A freshman named Tariq, who'd never spoken to the boy before, sat alone at a small table near the window. He kept glancing at the empty corner, then at his phone where the video looped again in his messages. He'd filmed it without thinking, just reacting to the sudden tension in the air. Now he wondered if he should have done more. Should have said something, should have stood up, but fear had glued him to his seat, and now he carried that weight in his chest like a stone. Near the soda machine, two girls debated whether to report what they saw. "It's not like they hit him," one said. "But they humiliated him," the other replied. And everyone just watched. That was the part that stuck with people, not the shove, not the spilled food, but the watching. The collective silence that let it happen. By third period, a teacher noticed something unusual. During a group discussion in history class, a usually quiet student raised her hand and said, "What do you do when you see something wrong but you're scared to speak up?" The room went still. The teacher didn't give a textbook answer. She just said, "Sometimes doing the right thing starts with just not looking away." That line traveled fast, In the art room, someone pinned a blank sheet of paper to the community board with a note. If you saw what happened at lunch yesterday, write how it made you feel. By the end of the day, the page was covered in handwriting, some angry, some ashamed, some just sad. One note read, "I wish I'd offered him my seat." Meanwhile, the three boys tried to act like nothing had changed. They laughed louder in the hallway, bumped shoulders with anyone who made eye contact, and claimed the whole thing was blown out of proportion. But their confidence was cracking. One of them kept checking his phone, seeing messages from people he thought were friends. "Not cool, man. You really thought that was okay?" Another skipped lunch entirely, claiming he wasn't hungry, but everyone knew better. The principal hadn't made an announcement. No teachers had called an assembly, and yet the school was responding, not through rules or punishments, but through something quieter and more powerful: collective conscience. Even the lunch menu felt symbolic. That day's special was build your own wrap, and the line stretched longer than usual, not because the food was good, but because it gave students an excuse to stand together, talk in low voices, and exchange glances that said, "Did you see it too?" Back outside, the boy finally closed his notebook. He stood, stretched, and walked toward the science wing for his next class. As he passed a group of underclassmen near the bike racks, one of them nodded at him, not with pity but with respect. The boy nodded back, surprised but not suspicious. He didn't know why, but the air felt lighter than it had in weeks. What he didn't know was that his quiet walk out of the cafeteria had done something unexpected. It had given other people permission to speak up. Not because he demanded it, but because his silence had been so dignified, so steady, that it forced everyone else to look at their own choices. By the end of the day, 5 students had gone to the counseling office, not to tattle, but to ask how to support someone who'd been treated unfairly. Another 3 approached a teacher about starting a peer support group, and Tariq, the freshman with the phone, finally sent the video to the school's anonymous tip line, with a message. This shouldn't be normal. No one was shouting. No one was staging a walkout. But something real was happening beneath the surface, a slow, steady turning of the tide, the kind that doesn't make headlines but changes hallways. And the boy under the oak tree, he still didn't know any of it. He just went home, did his homework, and wondered why his little sister asked him at dinner, "Are you okay?" when he hadn't said a word about school. But the next morning, when he walked into Lincoln High, he noticed something small but strange. More eyes met his. Not with curiosity or judgment, but with something like quiet solidarity. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't know it yet, but the ripple he'd started was just beginning to reach the shore. By the 3rd day, the silence had worn thin. It wasn't that anyone had planned a confrontation. No one marched into the office with a petition. No dramatic speech was made over the loudspeaker. But something had shifted in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks when the wind stills and everyone holds their breath. The video was no longer just a clip passed between friends. It had reached teachers, it had reached parents, and now it had reached the principal's desk. She didn't call an assembly. She didn't make a public statement. But early that morning, before the first bell, she met with the school counselor, the dean of students, and 2 teachers who'd been at lunch that day. They reviewed the footage. They read the anonymous tip. They listened to the quiet but steady stream of students who'd come forward, not with accusations, but with concern. And then one by one, the 3 boys were called out of class. Not together. Not as a group. Separately. Each walked into the small conference room off the main office with that familiar swagger. Shoulders back, chin up, like they were being honored, not questioned. But the moment the door closed, the act faltered. The questions weren't shouted. They weren't even angry. They were calm, direct. What happened in the cafeteria? Why did you feel it was okay to treat another student that way? Did you consider how he might feel? At first, they gave the usual answers. It was just a joke. He didn't say anything. We didn't mean anything by it. But the adults didn't nod along, they just waited. Let the silence stretch. Let the weight of those words hang in the air until they started to sound hollow, even to the boys themselves. One of them cracked first. Not with tears, but with a shrug and a muttered, "I guess it looked worse than I thought." Another admitted, voice low, I didn't think anyone would care. The third stayed quiet the longest, arms crossed, eyes on the floor, until the counselor asked, if it had been your little brother, would you have laughed then? He didn't answer. But his jaw tightened, and that was answer enough. Meanwhile, the boy who'd walked out was in chemistry, balancing equations like any other day. He still hadn't seen the video, still hadn't been told about the meetings, the whispers, the way his quiet exit had become a quiet catalyst, but he could feel the change. In the hallway, a girl he'd never spoken to held the door open for him. In gym class, someone passed him the ball without hesitation. Small things, but they added up. What surprised everyone, even the staff, was who started speaking up next. It wasn't just the usual advocates or the student council, it was the quiet ones, the ones who sat in the back. A star midfielder from the soccer team mentioned during practice that, we don't treat people like that on my watch. A senior, who'd never missed a homework assignment, wrote a short reflection in her journal and left it on the counselor's desk. I stayed silent because I didn't want trouble. But silence is its own kind of trouble. By lunchtime, 5 students had filed formal reports, not to get anyone expelled, but to say clearly and on record, this isn't okay. They weren't angry, they were firm, and that made all the difference. The principal made a decision. No suspensions yet, no public shaming. Instead, she called for something the school had only tried once before, a restorative circle. Not as punishment, but as a chance to understand, to listen, to repair. But before that could happen, something unexpected occurred. One of the 3 boys, the one who dumped the tray, walked into the counselor's office during his free period. He didn't sit. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, voice barely above a whisper. Is he okay? The counselor didn't answer right away. Just asked, why do you want to know? The boy hesitated then, because I keep seeing it. Him just walking away, like he expected it. He swallowed hard. I didn't think he'd care. But maybe that's the problem. I didn't think at all. That moment didn't fix everything, but it was a crack in the wall. And cracks let light in. Back in the cafeteria, the usual lunch chaos returned, but with new rules, unspoken but understood. No one claimed tables like territory anymore. No one laughed too loud at someone else's expense, and when the boy finally returned to eat inside on Thursday, no one stared, no one whispered. A sophomore even slid an extra napkin toward his tray without saying a word. He nodded in thanks. That was all. The real turning point came during 5th period, in a classroom no one would have expected. Woodshop. One of the boys, the quietest of the 3, was sanding a block of pine when his teacher, a man who'd worked construction before teaching, paused beside him. You ever think about how actions leave marks? He asked, not looking at the boy, just at the wood. Even when you smooth it over, the grain remembers. The boy didn't reply. But he sanded slower after that, more carefully. By the end of the day, the administration had notified parents, not with blame, but with facts. And to their surprise, most responded not with defensiveness, but with concern. One mother said, I raised him better than that. Another asked, how can he make it right? That night, the boy under the oak tree sat on his porch, sketching in his notebook again. His little sister sat beside him, braiding a friendship bracelet. She didn't ask about school, she just said, you seem lighter today. He smiled. Yeah, he said. I do. He still didn't know about the reports, didn't know about the restorative circle being planned, didn't know that his simple act of walking away, without rage, without drama, had given others the courage to step forward. But he could feel it, in the way people met his eyes, in the space that was finally, quietly, made for him. And for the first time in a long time, lunch didn't feel like something to survive. It just felt like lunch. The storm hadn't passed, but the clouds were breaking. And somewhere in the school, 3 boys were beginning to understand that regret isn't the end of the story. It's the start of a different one. The restorative circle took place on a Friday afternoon in a classroom usually used for peer mentoring. The desks were pushed to the walls. In the center, chairs formed a loose ring. No podium, no audience. Just 8 people. The 3 boys, the boy who'd been pushed out, 2 student facilitators trained in conflict resolution, the counselor, and a teacher who'd volunteered to sit in, not to judge, but to listen. No one was forced to be there. That was the point. Restorative work only worked if people showed up willing. And to everyone's quiet surprise, they all did. The boy who'd walked out of the cafeteria that day almost didn't come. He sat on his bed that morning, staring at his shoes, wondering if it was worth reopening something he'd already put behind him. But his older cousin, home from college for the weekend, said something that stuck with him. "You don't have to go to fix them. You go so they finally see you." So he went. He didn't say much at first, just sat with his hands folded, eyes calm, taking in the room. The 3 boys looked different without their usual armor. No loud voices. No posturing. One kept fiddling with the strap of his backpack. Another stared at his knees like they held answers. The third, the one who dumped the tray, sat stiffly like he was bracing for a blow that never came. The facilitator started simple. "Why are we here?" one asked. "To talk about what happened in the cafeteria," said the counselor. Then came the hard part. "Who was affected?" Silence stretched. Then one of the boys mumbled, "Him." He nodded toward the boy in the corner. "And I guess everyone who saw it." The facilitator nodded. "And how were they affected?" Another pause. Longer this time. Finally, the tallest boy spoke, voice low. People stopped sitting with us. Teachers looked at us different. Like we were... Bless him, he swallowed. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is knowing we made someone feel like they didn't belong in their own school. The room stayed quiet, not out of awkwardness, but respect. Then the boy who'd been targeted spoke. Not with anger, not with blame, but with quiet clarity. "I didn't care about the pizza," he said. "I didn't even care about the milk. What hurt was that no one moved. Not one person said, 'Hey, that's not cool.' It made me feel like maybe I really didn't belong. Like maybe I was too much trouble to stand up for." His words landed like stones in still water, ripples moving outward. One of the other boys looked up, eyes glistening. "I didn't think it was that serious," he admitted. "I thought it was just lunchroom stuff. But seeing your face when you walked out, I can't unsee it." The conversation didn't magically fix everything. There were awkward pauses, moments of defensiveness that quickly softened. But for the first time, they weren't talking past each other. They were listening. After the circle ended, no one shook hands. No grand apologies. But as they filed out, the boy who dumped the tray lingered. He didn't say sorry right then, maybe because the word felt too small for what had happened. Instead, he just said, "I see you now." And for the first time, it sounded like he meant it. That weekend, something small but meaningful happened. A group of students, none of them part of any official club, started setting up folding tables in the courtyard during lunch. They called it the open spot, no sign up, no rules. Just a place where anyone could sit, no questions asked. Word spread fast. By Monday, the tables were full, not just with students who'd felt left out before, but with athletes, band kids, even a few seniors who said they were just tired of the same old cliques. The boy showed up on Tuesday. He brought his usual apple. This time someone offered him a bag of chips. He took one, said thanks, no fanfare, just a normal lunch among people who chose to be there, together. Back inside the cafeteria, things were changing too. The 3 boys served a 3-day suspension, not as punishment but as a pause. When they returned, they didn't reclaim their old table. They sat near the back, quieter, more aware. One started eating lunch in the library. Another joined a tutoring group after school. The third began showing up early to help the custodian reset chairs. No one asked him to. He just did, teachers noticed. Not because they were looking for redemption, but because the energy in the hallways had shifted. Fewer side eyes, less tension at lunch, more kids saying hey to people outside their usual circles. One afternoon, the counselor found a folded note on her desk. It read, I used to think being tough meant never backing down. Now I think being tough means owning when you're wrong. It wasn't signed, but she knew who it was from. The real test came during a pep rally the following week. Midway through, someone in the bleachers made a snide comment about people who don't know their place. Before the teacher could react, two students, one from the soccer team, one from the robotics club, turned around and said, "Not here." Just like that. No yelling, no drama, just a quiet line drawn in the sand. The comment stopped. The rally went on, but everyone felt it, the unspoken agreement that the old ways wouldn't fly anymore. At home, the boy's little sister asked him if school was better now. He thought about it. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it feels more like a place where I can just be me." And that was enough. What started as a moment of cruelty had become something else entirely, not because one person shouted the loudest, but because many chose to speak up softly, consistently, and together. No grand speeches, no viral fame, just ordinary kids deciding that kindness wasn't weakness and that silence wasn't neutrality. By the end of the week, the courtyard tables had a name painted on a small wooden sign someone carved in shop class. "All are welcome." It wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be, because the message wasn't in the sign. It was in the empty chair saved for the new transfer student, in the shared bag of pretzels, in the way people now looked up when someone walked by, not to judge, but to see. And in that quiet shift, something real had taken root. Not justice in the loud, dramatic sense, but something deeper, something that might actually last. Weeks passed, then a month. The kind of time that doesn't announce itself but changes everything anyway. The cafeteria at Lincoln High still smelled like fries and floor cleaner. The lunch bell still sent students rushing through the doors like a wave. But something fundamental had shifted, not in the layout or the menu, but in the air between people. It wasn't perfect. There were still cliques, still awkward silences, still days when someone said the wrong thing. But now when it happened, someone else noticed. And more often than not, they said something. The boy who once ate alone under the oak tree still liked the courtyard. He liked the way the sun hit the benches in the afternoon, and how the wind carried bits of laughter from the soccer field. But now he didn't sit alone. Not because he had to, but because he chose to share the space. Sometimes with a freshman who just moved from another state. Sometimes with a girl who loved sketching birds in her notebook. Sometimes with no one at all, and that was okay too. He never became a hero in the loud spotlight kind of way. He didn't give interviews or lead assemblies. He just kept showing up, quiet, steady himself. And in doing so, he reminded others that dignity doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just walks away and lets the truth do the talking. The three boys never became best friends with him. That wasn't the point, but they stopped pretending the incident never happened. One started volunteering with the after-school reading program. Another joined a student-led diversity committee, not for credit, but because he finally understood that not being racist wasn't enough. You had to be actively kind. The third still struggled. Some days he slipped back into old habits, making a joke that landed wrong, rolling his eyes when someone spoke up. But now his friends called him on it, gently, firmly. "You know better," they'd say. And most of the time he did. The real change wasn't in grand gestures. It was in the small things that piled up like stones building a path. Like the way lunch monitors no longer turned away when tension flared. They stepped in, calmly, like it was part of their job, because now it was. Like how the school added a suggestion box outside the counseling office and actually read what students wrote. Like the fact that the open spot in the courtyard wasn't just for lunch anymore. On rainy days, it moved to the empty art room. On Fridays, someone brought a speaker and played old Motown songs while people did homework. Even the teachers changed. Not all of them, but enough. A history teacher started opening class with a moment of respect. A minute where students could share something good that happened to them, or someone they appreciated. A science teacher began using group work that mixed students who'd never talked before. "You never know what someone's carrying," she told her class, "so assume they're doing their best." One afternoon, the boy's little sister visited the school for a sibling tour day. She walked into the cafeteria during lunch and scanned the room. She expected to see her brother tucked in a corner, head down. Instead, she saw him laughing with two other students over a game of tic-tac-toe drawn on a napkin. She didn't say anything, just smiled and kept walking. But later she told her mom, "He looks like he belongs," and maybe that was the quiet victory no one saw coming. Not punishment, not revenge, but belonging. The simple, powerful feeling of being allowed to take up space without apology. The video that started it all? It never went public. No one posted it online. The student who filmed it deleted it after sending it to the tip line. It wasn't mine to share, they later said. And in that choice there was another kind of courage. The kind that protects instead of exploits. By spring, the courtyard tables had a small garden growing beside them, pots of marigolds and herbs planted by the environmental club. Someone had tied a wind chime to the oak tree. It made a soft sound when the breeze picked up, like the school itself was breathing easier. Graduation neared. Seniors signed each other's shirts. Underclassmen counted down the days until summer. And in the middle of it all, the boy sat on his usual bench, writing in his notebook one last time before finals. He wasn't working on a story anymore. He was writing a letter to his younger self. Just a few lines. You don't have to be small to be safe. You can take up space and still be kind, and you're not alone. He folded it and tucked it into his pocket. On the last day of school, something small happened that no one filmed, no one reported, but everyone felt. As students filed out for summer break, the three boys stood near the bike racks, not talking, just waiting. When the boy walked by, the tallest one nodded. Not a big gesture, not an apology, just a quiet acknowledgement. I see you. I remember. The boy nodded back. No words were needed, because the real lesson hadn't been about bullies or victims. It had been about community. How one moment of cruelty can ripple outward, yes, but so can one act of quiet strength. And when enough people choose to stand with someone instead of against them, the whole ground shifts. That summer, the courtyard stayed empty. But come August, when students returned for the new year, the tables were still there. The sign still hung, and new faces sat down without hesitation, as if they'd always known they were welcome. The boy came back too, a little taller, a little more at ease. He didn't sit under the oak tree every day anymore. Sometimes he ate inside the cafeteria, right near the window in the same corner where it all began. And this time, no one told him to leave, because the space was his too. And in the end, that's all he'd ever wanted. Not to win, not to be famous, but to belong. To eat his lunch in peace, surrounded by people who saw him not as a problem, but as a person. That's how change really happens. Not with fireworks, not with speeches, but with a tray dropped, a walk away, a video shared, a circle formed, a seat saved, a nod given. One quiet choice at a time.